Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, August 15th, and I am very pleased to welcome back the great political writer from the Los Angeles Times, columnist, friend, former colleague, Mark Z. Barabak. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How's about you?
Now, in a moment of lunacy, I told the grandkids I would take them camping before summer was over, and now they're going back to school Monday. So I got to, anyway. Don't ever don't ever do that. All right, listen. You were here, I don't know, maybe just 6 weeks ago, right after the great debate,
Yeah.
and
Also known as a lifetime ago. Yeah.
yes, a lifetime ago. And I know one of your big influences is V.I. Lenin, who
Yes.
said or didn't that there are decades nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen, and that seems to be what we've been going through this summer. Let me start by just asking you to give me your overview of this situation and what you like to call your political landscape. Where
Yeah.
are we?
Yeah. Good old Vladimir. May he rest. He's still resting in peace, I think.
Looks
Um,
good.
He does. He does for 100, however old he is. Boy, what a start. I mean, I think it's fair to say no one sentient, no one alive in this age and time has seen anything like we've seen in the last, what's it been, 6 weeks? I mean, you can sort of set the clock from that. I kind of ran out of adjectives trying to describe how truly awful Biden's debate performance was. So for simplicity's sake, we'll just say awful. Everything flowing from that, with, of course, the exception of the attempt on former President Trump's life. But we had this debacle of a debate, as I just mentioned, an attempted assassination of Trump. Biden leads the ticket. Kamala, Vice President Harris, if you prefer, goes on the ticket and rides this rocket ship that shows no signs of coming back to Earth. It's going to. Okay, the laws of gravity have not been suspended. She will come back down to Earth. Probably sometime in the next 80 some days, and we'll talk about this very, very short campaign. I don't know about you, it reminds me a lot about the recall election we had here in California, 2003, a snap election. But what's happened is the race has been utterly and thoroughly reconstituted. I mean, there are no certainties in life, and as smart as you are, you and I are combined, which doesn't get us close to good old Vladimir, but put together our collective brain power, I don't think either one of us foresaw happening what has happened. I mean, the race has been transformed. It went from what looked to be, again, no certainties in life. It looked like a Trump landslide potentially, the full magnification of Washington, Trump winning handily. I mean, maybe even winning in states like New Mexico and Virginia, that by all rights, I mean, I could go down the list, that by all rights should not be competitive. Trump landslide. Trump brings in a Republican Senate. Trump brings in a Republican House. We already have a Trump-appointed Supreme Court. And then Kamala is ascendant. Kamala is anointed. Kamala is the new Democratic nominee. And the polls turn around. I mean, just mind-blowing sums of money pouring into her campaign. Big crowds. I wrote about that in a column yesterday, talking about Trump with this crowd envy thing, just going absolutely bananas. Because empirically, I mean, there's something called the Crowd Count Consortium, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I think Trump was averaging like 5,600. Old Joe was getting about 1,200. Kamala Harris was averaging close to 13,500. Huge crowds, tremendous excitement. It is, to use the cliche, a whole new ball game.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to figure out, doing a little math. I only been doing this for 48 years, and it seems like you've been doing it for about 45 years. So we're getting close to 100. Nothing like this. I mean, it's just extraordinary. So bottom line, what would you say? It's a coin toss election today?
I think if the election was held today, which obviously it's not, I would give the edge to Kamala Harris just in terms of enthusiasm. The numbers are moving her direction. There's that enthusiasm I talked about. But again, reaching that old cliche bag, fill in whatever duration of time is a lifetime in politics. We still have 80 some days. We haven't talked yet about the debate, which I think could be really, really, really important. Right now, I would put a thumb on the scale for Kamala Harris, but we weren't that long ago talking about, a Trump landslide. Things have changed. Things could change again.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go through it. Let's talk about Kamala first. Excuse me, Vice President Harris. You and I have known her a long time, going back to her local and state days. I don't know about you. I am extremely surprised, to find her as the Democratic nominee, and B, she seems much improved, although she hasn't actually sat down and answered any questions yet, like how did you come to be for fracking and then against fracking, and a whole bunch of other kind of left-wing stuff that she embraced when she ran unsuccessfully in 2020, actually 2019. How do you think she's doing? Has she changed? Has she improved that much? Or is it just sort of the meta politics that she's caught up in?
Yes. Let me elaborate. I did a column the day Biden stepped aside and said that Democrats were thrilled and terrified at the prospect of Kamala Harris as their nominee. Judging her on her 2020 presidential campaign, which was a disaster, not to put too fine a point on it, judging somewhat unfairly, I think, based on her performance as vice president. I mean, I wrote a lot of columns. There was a remarkable gap between reality and expectation. There was the expectation that Kamala Harris, as this historic figure, would come in and make a huge splash and be hugely consequential. And that's not the job of vice president. Doesn't matter if you're Kamala Harris, doesn't matter if you're Jerry Roberts, doesn't matter if you're Fred Flintstone or Batman. The job of the vice president is first and foremost not to overshadow the president. So the fact that she was diminished, the fact that she disappeared, I think I did a column that was, something along the lines of the incredible disappearing vice president, gave this impression, and some of it deserved. I mean, she did have a really rough start, did a lot of bad interviews, threw out a lot of word salad, those sorts of things. I did a piece in February, and forgive me for sounding like but I did a piece in February. Went out on the road with her, and the headline or the gist of it was, seems to have found her groove. What happened? A couple of things happened. In 2020, Kamala Harris never really had any purpose other than, hey, I'm running, let's make history and make a black woman president. Wouldn't that be great? Right. And there was no, to use the old knock against my beloved hometown, Oakland, there was no there. That and the fact that, well, there are a couple of things. Let me finish that thought. There wasn't a lot of there, and there wasn't a deep-rooted set of principles. So, are you for Medicare for all? Sure. Well, maybe not. Should people on death row be allowed to vote? Well, that's something we should say. Never mind. So the other thing she had going was she was trying to be something that she was not. At the urging of some of her strategists, they were trying to turn her into a Twitter lefty, which she is not. She is fundamentally sort of a center, a left shading toward the center kind of Democrat, reminding me somewhat of Dianne Feinstein, someone we both know and have covered, right? They were trying to turn her into some lefty that she is not. So bring forward to the current circumstance. It's to her huge benefit that she's not running in a Democratic primary. She doesn't have to worry about appeasing, the Twitter MSNBC wing of the Democratic Party. They're there. She can hug the middle. She can be more centrist. She can, in effect, be more of who she is than trying to pretend someone that she is not. The other thing is, when the Dobbs decision came, overturning Roe versus Wade, it gave Kamala Harris a purpose. It is an issue she is very, very comfortable with. And it gave her a role, prosecuting the case against Republicans and Trump, that she's very, very comfortable with. And you can see it. I spent a lot of time reporting on Kamala Harris. I know a lot of people who know Kamala Harris. She was in kind of this doom, loopy cycle early in the vice presidency where she would do something, she'd screw up, it would mess up her confidence, and so she performed poorly, which would mess up her confidence. It's kind of doom. Now she's in the opposite, the sort of virtuous cycle where everything she touches, and again, a lot of this is sort of, irrational exuberance, if you will. Everything is coming up golden for her. I think that's boosted her self-confidence. I know, having spoken to people, she was very frustrated. She felt that she was kind of put on this box on the shelf for 3 years, and now she's liberated. She can go out and she can do it. So she's in sort of this virtuous cycle. And last but not least, I think a lot of what is buoying Democrats, we're talking about, you're bringing up Lenin, I'll bring up another of our good friends, Winston Churchill, who talked about nothing being quite so exhilarating at being shot at and missed. Democrats were resigned to a disaster in November, losing the White House, losing the Senate, losing the House. They're like, holy smokes, we got a shot at this. There is a tremendous amount of relief, exuberance, exhilaration at being shot at and missed. And I think a lot of that is showing up right now in terms of the money, in terms of the crowds.
Yeah. All right.
Hang on, can I stop you? There's that noise. Can I get him to shut the
Go.
door?
I'll pause it for.
Okay. All right.
All right, we're back. All right, I agree with basically 98% of what you said, but I want to drill down on one point. You mentioned in 2020, it appeared she didn't have any principles, and so that's sort of two questions arise from that. A, what is she going to do about all those issues? Fracking, Medicare for all, defund the police, things that she embraced more or less when there was this huge rush to the left in that Democratic primary. I mean, I had Elizabeth Warren was a moderate to basically, and that, I mean, it was really something. It was really ideological. And then two, they've put out these statements. Oh, she's not against fracking anymore. Oh, how does she deal with that? And how does she define herself now before Trump drops a couple $100 million of advertising on her head, bringing all that stuff up, which is not popular with the mainstream, obviously.
Right. And I'm doing the inflation calculation in my head because it wouldn't be a $64,000 question. So with inflation, it would be like, what, $700 million? That is the huge question. How does she? Her campaign has to be anticipating those questions the first time she sits down. If they're smart, if Kamala Harris is smart, they will have an answer to it. I'm not sure what it's going to be. They have to anticipate, and that's really going to be the first test. I mean, she has been cosseted, if you will, and I think it makes sense just to take a step back. I mean, the press is hewing and crying, and as a member of the fourth estate, I think it's really important that candidates answer questions and put their views out there. But from a political strategy point of view, if things are going great, why stop, right? Okay, so at some point she's going to have to answer those questions, and that's going to be a test. Can she step up and give a good answer? And we will find out. That's kind of going to be the end of the honeymoon and sort of the first real test. It's like, okay, you've done great so far. How are you going to answer these questions? Again, they can see them coming from 10 zillion miles away. What's going to be a response? I think it'll be very telling, not just in terms of what her response is going to be, how she's going to answer that question, how politically adept, how politically astute is her answer going to be?
Yeah, right. And I don't know, I probably interviewed her a half dozen times mostly when she was Attorney General. And my experience has been that if you ask I don't know, not a nasty, but, sort of a really hard question that challenges her, she doesn't like it. She kind of pushes back in a way that doesn't look good, i.e. the Lester Holt interview, when he asked her why she hadn't been to the border, and
right.
Well, I haven't been to Europe either. Well, that was not a good answer. Has that been your experience as well? And B, do you think she's grown enough in how to handle media stuff that she can get through that?
I'm thinking back about the times I've had where I've interviewed her, and I haven't, honestly, most of them have either been sort of off the record or in more sort of casual settings where we've just kind of be asked about politics or other stuff. I haven't had it's been a long time since I've had a formal sit down.
Of course, I was interviewing her for CalBuzz, which she hated, so that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, we're both baseball fans. I mean, can she hit big league pitching, right? Right now it's in kind of T-ball. You go up, you give a speech and people cheer you. Will she do better? Can she do better? I mean, again, that's the question, and we don't know. I think she'll have to do better than she has. I think that again, not just I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not going to play one on the show or in the paper, but I do know from folks I talk to who, again, She was going through a real sort of crisis of confidence sort of stuff. She screwed up. She knew she screwed up. Will the fact that she's doing better bolster her confidence and make her perform? I use that word very consciously. Perform better
Right.
in a media interview. I don't know. We'll see. That's
Yeah.
that's going to be a big test.
You think just, I mean, this is what is this? An unknowable unknown. You think she does an interview before their convention starts on Monday, or do you think she tries to clean all this up in the context of the convention?
I mean, again, I would guess that they will wait as long as they can before doing an interview if they can. I mean, if she does an interview on the eve of the well, I've got some experience. I didn't
Lawrence O'Donnell is on vacations this week, so I don't.
Yeah, I did an interview with Bob Dole, which will date me, on the eve of the convention in San Diego, where he famously said he hadn't read the platform and wouldn't pay attention to it if he had. So I don't know what the percentage is in giving an interview. It's just whatever she says will be picked apart. So if I had to guess, I mean, if I was, again, took off my journalist columnist hat and did a political strategist hat, I'd say, why do an interview before the convention? All you're going to do is step on what will be a love fest. We can talk about Chicago. I mean, my God, there was a run on black crepe. Yeah, I am going. There was a run on black crepe. I mean, if Biden had been there, could you imagine how funereal and sad it would have been? I mean, this is going to be a love fest. We're going to see all that bubbling Democratic exuberance. So again,
how many people has the Times sent to the convention?
This is actually I think we just had a meeting. I think we're gonna have a dozen people there, which is kind of like the old days. Kind of like, I mean, not quite. I mean, I was at conventions where there was as many as 50 people. Half of whom were working on their dinner reservation. But yeah, I think we're gonna have a dozen people there, which is kind of like the olden days.
That's great. That really is. I'm so pleased to hear that. All right, let's talk about Trump a little bit, because we could spend the whole time talking about Kamala. But you mentioned Winston Churchill saying how it clarifies the mind to be shot at and missed. Seems to have done the opposite to Trump. Is it I mean, I don't know. I just sit here and read stuff and watch stuff. But there does seem to be among the commentariat the notion that he's worse, that his behavior has become more bizarre and more unhinged and more not what his strategists would like him to be doing. What's your impression?
I don't know if I would correlate that to the attempted assassination as much as Kamala Harris taking over for Joe Biden. I think he was, first of all, I think, I was in Wisconsin. I mean, to say there was a celebratory air
at the Republican convention.
Understates the mood. I mean, it was done. It was over. The only question was how big a landslide Trump was going to win and how big a majority in the House and Senate Republicans were going to enjoy. As we've said, whole new ball game, completely reconstituted. I think Donald Trump is struggling. And, it made me think about Nancy Pelosi, who eventually we're going to get around to. If you'll remember, there was a long time during Trump's presidency when he didn't have the names for Pelosi, and he was almost a little deferential. I think, and here I am playing pop psychologist, I think Donald Trump has a problem with strong, assertive, powerful women.
Nancy Pelosi. How about Black women in particular?
Well, there you go. And that just adds a whole other layer.
Black women prosecutors.
Yeah, I think we saw that with Nancy Pelosi for a very long time. He didn't know how to deal with her, how to address her. I think we're seeing that with Kamala Harris. He is definitely knocked off his game, if you will. I think he's casting about. I think he just doesn't know what to do and how to deal with Kamala Harris. And the debate on September 10th is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah. I just put my 2 cents in here because I do play a psychologist quite often. I have the greatest job in journalism, being accountable to no one. But I just wonder that, as a person, as an actual human, to get shot at, something hit his ear, it was probably a matter of millimeters. That's got to have some effect on you. I would think, no matter who you are. I'm strong. I put my fist in the air, all that. I don't know. I just wonder if that's kind of part of it. What do you think? All right, let's talk about message for a second, because this was, I think, the key to Harris coming out with such a rocket fuel. We won't go back,
Yeah.
because we had this race that no one wanted. Two guys who were each 100 years old.
Yep.
All of a sudden, here's a new generation, and she's 59, but it's still a new generation. And that message, we won't go back, has so many layers to it.
Yeah.
But the first, the surface one is it's a generational thing. I'm looking at the future. Do you really want to get back with all this stuff that this guy's doing?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. We won't go back. Perhaps she's speaking for minorities. Maybe she's speaking for women. I mean, there's just a lot of things wrapped up in that. I think it's brilliant. What is Trump's message?
Well, you're asking me to boil down his message. It's that her crowds are fake. She only became black fairly recently. No one knows how to pronounce her last name. Her name. No one knows what her last name is. I mean, it's just throw the proverbial spaghetti against the wall. I mean, what is a successful message if Trump were to prosecute the case? It's about inflation. It's about immigration. It's about the failings as perceived of the Biden administration. But it's not a message that he's driving. I mean, a good, successful, cohesive campaign sort of hits these elements on all different levels in what's called the earned media, which is standing up in front of a microphone and talking, in advertising, in surrogates going on the air. There's a cohesion there. There's cohesion there. And what you have is almost two tracks. It's like, Trump's surrogates, very much urging him to get with the program, are talking about things like the border. And, we can talk about whether, the border is working or not, or, numbers are up or down, crime is down. But we can talk about, driving a message, right? Crime is out of control. The border is open and out of control. Inflation is running rampant, at least driving a message. So you have sort of one aspect of Trump Republican world driving that. And then you have Trump standing in front of a microphone and ripping. I mean, case in point, yesterday, he was going to give a major economic address in which he says, yeah, I don't even know if the economy is that big an issue. They tell me it is. So, I mean, the words discipline and Donald Trump, right? They just,
Yeah, no, they definitely, I mean, the problem is the candidate. I mean, they have a good campaign organization. They have smart strategists. They have the issues, certainly. This line, Harris and Walz, the most radical ticket in American history. I mean, there's a message, and it goes to kind of everything, but he won't say it, or doesn't want to say it, or is incapable of saying it. You're right. I mean, it's just, there's nothing consistent. It's just this stream of consciousness stuff coming out of his head about Hannibal Lecter.
Well, and to be clear, look, I don't want to make this sound like Kamala Harris is waltzing to the White House. It's a very competitive race. Donald Trump, has proven, I have written and said in columns, not just he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, he could sexually maul a woman in a Bloomingdale's fitting room and people will still vote for him. So there is a hardcore coup.
He could mount a coup and people would still vote.
Yes, exactly. So, there is a hardcore, very, very solid base that Donald Trump has that makes this a very close race, particularly when you look at the Electoral College and the way the numbers line up there. So it's not like Kamala Harris is running away with this race or is going to run away with this race. But to go back to what we said, Democrats went from despairing and essentially writing this campaign off to thinking they've got a pretty darn good fighting chance.
Yeah. Jeff Greenfield had an interesting column this week, part-time Montecito resident. I think it was in Politico, making the basic point that, the best thing to have in a presidential race is the future. And I think that's the edge she's got right now. Let's talk about the Electoral College, because of course that's what it all comes down to. Okay, these numbers are from our friend Larry Sabato, Um, uh, so he says Dems start with 226. You have to get to 270 electoral votes.
Right.
As every child knows, every state gets their 2 senators plus whatever their number of representatives is, and that's their number of electoral votes for the state. So he says Dems start with a base of 226, Republicans 235, and say there's 6 states in play. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Let's talk up first about a couple states that you have been to fairly recently. Arizona, they just, I guess, approved for the ballot this abortion rights measure that's going to be on in November. Trump was running well ahead of Biden there. It's tightened up according to the latest polls. What's your take on what's
it's kind of, and I just want to go back. I would add another state that's on the cusp that could be competitive, North Carolina, whereas it happens both candidates are. That, I mean, that's one thing Kamala Harris has done. I mean, with Biden there, Democrats were looking at basically drawing to an inside straight, winning those 3 supposed blue wall states or former blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, just eking it out, maybe with, winning that one electoral vote in Omaha.
right.
Kamala Harris has broadened it. She's put places, as you suggest, like Arizona, Nevada looked to be slipping away, although it's always hard to pull in Nevada and they always have close races. Georgia looked to be slipping away. North Carolina, as I said, has come online. I mean, Arizona, a very, very competitive state, very close state. Biden only won it by like either 11 or 14,000 votes, not very, very much. First Democrat since Harry Truman to carry Maricopa County. I did a piece out of there, I think it was May or so, talking about that ballot measure. I mean, Democrats, that abortion ballot measures, Democrats are really, really looking at that to boost turnout. A really important part, I talked to a Democratic strategist yesterday. We were kicking things around. I mean, 2 of the really big things that Kamala Harris needs to worry about or remediate, if you will, is the Latino vote. I mean, I don't want to overstate it. Democrats are winning the Latino vote and will win the Latino vote. Will they win 65% of the Latino vote? Will they win 58% of the Latino vote? That could be hugely consequential. In places like Arizona, in places like Nevada, even in places you don't think about it. Georgia has a very substantial Latino population. North Carolina has a very substantial Latino population. The other thing Kamala Harris needs to remediate is her standing among Black men. Black women, interesting, Black women are not only the most reliable Democratic constituency, they're also the highest voting demographic out there. Black women vote. They vote regularly, they vote reliably, and they vote reliably Democratic. Black men, Trump made some inroads. He seems to be making more inroads. Can Kamala Harris close that gap? I mean, again, I was talking to someone yesterday and we were talking about, I always like to ask the contra question, if you're wrong, why are you wrong? And this person was feeling very good about Kamala Harris. And I said, so if you're wrong, and if, a year from now, you and I are in the gulag for all the things we've written, what will have happened? And this strategy suggested that, Trump will make very significant, very meaningful inroads among Latino voters, which goes to the Arizona and Nevada piece of this as well. I mentioned Georgia, North Carolina, and then Black men.
Yeah. Wow. She has, however, consolidated most of the Democratic vote in a way. I mean, that's what was killing Biden. The Democrat, his own party didn't want to vote.
Yes. And young people can't understate that. I have, 2 daughters. So, folks group of 2, margin of error plus or minus 99%. But, I talked to my 2 daughters who, can't abide Trump. And, we're going to vote for Biden without very much enthusiasm, but they were both very, very excited about Kamala Harris. I think we've seen that among young people. I mean, Biden was old, Trump is old. Kamala Harris, although she is, she's in the first blush of youth, by today's standards, 59, but she's dynamic. She's young seeming. She is a historic figure. I think she's excited people. I think a lot of the movement polls that we've seen is a lot of that base coming back to Kamala Harris, her direction, and some independent people, independent voters, quote, quote, I use the word loosely, but people who are sort of parking their votes as undecided or not sure because the so-called double haters who didn't like either Trump or Biden, some of them going Kamala Harris's way. Will they stick around? We'll see.
Yeah. And some of them were going with Kennedy until they found out he dumped a bear in Central Park, which I'm still trying to process that story. All right. Let me ask you about Pennsylvania, because that's really kind of what it's going to come down to in large part. I mean, you can play with these numbers all day long, but if Trump wins Pennsylvania and Georgia, it's over. He wins. A lot of people that I listen to on, various podcasts and read and so on really felt like she made a mistake by not picking Josh Shapiro, the very popular governor of Pennsylvania, as her running mate. She picked Tim Walz, who's getting great reviews, even though he's getting swift voted. What do you think? First, tell me how important you'll like this. How important is Pennsylvania, Mark?
Jerry, Pennsylvania, yes. This is for those who don't know, this is
very, very important.
A little joke we would have, yes, because typically what would happen is a candidate would land, set foot in California. The first question would be, how important is California? California is very, very important. So, Jerry, Pennsylvania is very, very important. Look, I think I wrote a column the day Walz was picked. I mean, again, I said in the column, and some people misinterpret it as gee, they're not enthusiastic. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are going to determine who's the next president of the United States. Okay. Yes, there are anecdotally people who I've heard from. Well, I was going to vote for McCain, but I didn't like Sarah Palin. Fine. 160 million people vote. There's going to be people out there. The vice presidential pick is not determinative. Josh Shapiro might have helped in Pennsylvania, but the history of people helping carry their states, you got to go all the way back to LBJ. I think that's sort of overstated. I think what I said, look, there are a lot of people who won't support a woman. A lot of people won't support a Black or Asian American woman. I think the combination of a Black, Asian American woman and a Jew on the same ticket was an awful lot for the weight-bearing load of today's politics. I think also she would have invited a lot of pushback, a lot of people who felt he was too pro-Israel. She avoided that. So yeah. I guess it's a long way of saying I don't agree with those who think she made a mistake by not picking Shapiro. I think instead of 2 weeks that have been dominated by, hey, he's just this affable former football coach kind of guy, would have been taken up or could have been taken up with a whole discussion about Israel and Gaza.
Genocide Josh.
I'm sorry?
Genocide Josh. That's
exactly. So I think she kind of dodged, well, I probably shouldn't say dodged a bullet in today's atmosphere. I think she avoided a headache that she might have invited. And I'm not at all convinced that Josh Shapiro would have meant her carrying Pennsylvania. I should say guarantee her carrying Pennsylvania.
The fracking thing is going to hurt her. They're just going to do that 25 times a day.
Yeah, they will, and it'll be interesting to see what her answer is. Pennsylvania is interesting. I think it was James Carville who famously described it as Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Alabama in between. Huge rural expanse, which is what has buoyed Trump, of course. Trump doing very, very well in rural America.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the debate a little bit. September 10th, maybe Trump will show up, maybe he won't. I think he probably will.
Yeah.
What does she have to do there? What does he have to do there?
Well, let's go back to the last debate, which, again, I ran out of adjectives to describe. I think I used awful, so let's just say terrible. Biden performed terribly. Trump didn't perform great either. Trump actually had,
but nobody noticed. Nobody noticed.
Exactly. It was just that Biden was so overly bad. But Trump, lied and had moments of incoherence. He said something about I can't remember. Was this crazy thing about water, or we had water when I was president? Some crazy. He said a lot of goofy, crazy stuff. What does Trump need to do? Trump needs to deliver a coherent, concise case against Kamala Harris and the danger that she, as using his words, crazy left-wing San Francisco Democrat, would bring to this country. He has to reassure people that he is not who he is, that he's someone who is solid, that he is someone who's responsible, that he's someone who's invested in talking about the future and not relitigating the past in the way he has up to now. Pretty tall order. pretty tall order, right?
But
What does Kamala Harris need to do? I think Kamala Harris, it'll be her introduction to a lot of people. So I think there are a lot of, I sort of liken it to 1980 when Ronald Reagan went up against Jimmy Carter. There were a lot of people who were predisposed to vote. I mean, again, Trump has his built-in support. Kamala Harris has her built-in support. I'm talking about people who are open-minded, persuadable.
the 12 people who live in Wisconsin, right?
Well, yeah. In those key states who are still undecided, what she needs to do is reassure people that she's not crazy, that she's not this radical lefty, right? With Ronald Reagan, it was this, crazy right-wing cowboy who's going to blow up the world, right? With Kamala Harris, it's this crazy lefty who's going to, turn America into, Lenin's vision of America. And it'll be interesting to see how she deals with Trump. I mean, does she fact check him in real time? One advantage she has is she is a prosecutor. She is someone who's trained to think on her feet and prosecute a case. I think it'll be very, very, very interesting to see how she handles Trump and how Trump handles her. Again, it goes back to what I said about having a problem with a strong woman, a strong Black woman who will give no quarter.
Yeah.
He doesn't like being pushed to get back against, and I think he really doesn't like being pushed back against by a woman.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We do have this, future versus past frame, but the other frame that they kind of came out with right at the start, and that, some people are still enamored of, is, the prosecutor versus the felon, right. Which to me seems a little more risky in terms of attracting people, sort of moderates in the middle, than this, almost Obama-like rhetoric that she's using about unifying the country, about being for everyone, and representing all the states and so on. I think there's a little danger of her overplaying that prosecutor felon thing, if she bangs too heavy on the keys.
Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to Reagan. He assured people in that 1980 debate that he wasn't the scary right-wing crazy cowboy. And I think she needs to reassure people that she's not this scary, dare I say, angry Black woman. I mean, I say that let's just be honest. So I think she wants to be strong. She wants to be resolute, but she doesn't want to be overbearing or angry. Is she up for that performance? And again, I use the word mindfully because it is a performance. Is she up for that? I mean, I think Kamala Harris is. One thing she is not, which Trump has called her, she's not dumb. Yes, she really hasn't had a lot of really tough races. I mean, the toughest race she had was when she ran for AG against Steve Cooley, almost lost. But she stepped up, and she's, like I said, I think she has the benefit. Reminds a lot of Nancy Pelosi, another person who people tended to underestimate. She has that going for her. I think a lot of people who don't know her or only know her as, the word salad lady or the incredible disappearing vice president. She's got an opportunity to introduce herself to a lot of people who don't know much about her, and what they do know may not be terribly favorable. So it's an opportunity for her.
Yeah. And finally, sort of the most perhaps consequential question we can raise about this is what happens if Trump loses? Because we're already setting the stage for, stolen, rigged. Any election that Republicans lose is now stolen or rigged. But this time, as I read in the popular press, they have local election officials who are talking about maybe they won't certify this.
Right.
You could see a scenario where it gets, confused, delayed, whatever. And of course, the worst scenario from the Democratic side would be if it goes to the House of Representatives, where every state delegation gets one vote and the Republicans outnumber the Democrats. What's your scenarios for what happens if Trump loses?
Well, they range all the way from, look, Trump is not going to concede and he's not going to go quietly. So they range all the way from Kamala Harris winning not in a landslide, but by handy enough margin that, it's just beyond dispute, even if some
Or
people
4 or 5 points in the
yeah,
popular. Yeah.
convincingly, winning convincingly. Trump's act getting stale. I mean, I think there's a large segment of the population that is just kind of like ready to turn the channel, change the channel, that's done with this, and would have very little use or interest in sort of relitigating the 2024 election. That's the best positive. The best positive outcome would be, should Trump lose, he's going to bleat, he's going to say what he's going to say, but people just basically changing the channel and saying, you know what, it's over, it's done, let's move on. All the way up to a constitutional crisis, all the way up to Kamala Harris winning the popular vote, losing the electoral college, or worse, winning the popular vote and then the House throwing it to Trump. Then we're entering the territory of constitutional crisis, more potential violence, country just spinning out of control. Something neither of us obviously would wish upon this beloved country of ours.
Yeah. It's gonna be a boy, 80 days left. It's really scary in a way to me. Fortunately, I'm old, so I'm not gonna be, but my kids, my grandkids, I'm not sure they grasp the consequence of this historic moment, what's really happening here, and the conflicts that are out there that need to be resolved. All right, we've been mentioning Nancy Pelosi a little bit. Let's just say a word about the role she played in getting Biden off the ticket. Just happened to, and I'm sure this was a coincidence, coinciding with her book tour. But she's kind of said some mean things about Biden's campaign, which I don't think were misplaced particularly. But gosh, she's just when we knew her in 1987 when she was first elected in that special. Who would have thought, and that she's the one behind the scenes, I think, who finally pushed him off.
Yeah. Nancy Pelosi has used the word reptilian about herself in a good way. Nancy Pelosi is, and I think she's proven it. I mean, like I said, we both covered her back in our heydays at the Chronicle. We both covered that first run for Congress. People don't underestimate Nancy Pelosi anymore. She has proven herself to be a master tactician, a brilliant strategist, completely ruthless, ruthlessly efficient, and still in power. I mean, think about it. She's just one of 435 Congress members, House members, right? The representative from San Francisco. But man, does she still wield a lot of power and a lot of clout, and it should be said, a lot of respect inside the Democratic Party, which is how she very artfully and deftly helped bring this about. It's funny, I was just having a conversation the other day and with someone talking about how she did this, and Joe Biden said time and again, I've made up my mind. I'm in this race to win it, on and on and on. And Nancy Pelosi said, well, Joe needs some time to
it goes on Morning Joe, which Biden watches.
Exactly. He made up his mind. She just didn't like the conclusion that he came to. But again, can't say enough about how shrewd she truly is. And this shouldn't be a shock to anybody, but I've pre-written the obituary. And when you say you write an obituary, people go like, oh, really? Well, let me, let folks in on a little secret of the news business. If someone dies, pick a name from a hat, Ringo Starr. You want to wait 5 or 6 days to read about it, right? It's like, oh, he died. You go, right? So yes, we do pre-write these obituaries. And I've done some interviews for it, and people say she will go down in history as one of the single most consequential House speakers ever in American history. Some will even tell you the most consequential. There might be some recency bias there, but there's no doubting how influential and significant and important, not just she was, but she remains.
She remains. Yeah. All right. Well, it's interesting and kind of fun how many Californians are in the middle of this.
I'm telling you. Yeah.
And we shouldn't leave without mentioning our Willie Brown, the former mayor and a longtime speaker,
who is not Nate Holden.
say who is not Nate Holden. And what wait, John Stewart just did such a fabulous bit about that, about the helicopters going down. And Willie decides to say to Trump, "Oh, before we go down, there's something you really need to know in case it ever comes in handy."
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
terrible things. But Willie's very funny. I mean, he loves the limelight. He got a little piece of it, but he didn't hog it.
Yeah.
Just,
My colleague George Skell did a good column. He talked to Willie. I suggest folks read it. It was very Willie. It was quite entertaining about that infamous chopper trip. I call it the Phantom Chopper ride.
All right. Any other thoughts before we leave it there? And you come back in 48 hours when everything changes again.
I was going to say, just so you know what, I mean, these have been a wild last 6 weeks. I would expect there's going to be at least another twist or turn or two before we get to November 5th. Don't ask me what they're going to be, but I think something's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Agreed. Hey, listen, thanks, brother. Mark Z. Barabak, political columnist for the Los Angeles Times. Read him at the LA Times website, or better yet, subscribe to his newsletter, which is what's the address for the newsletter?
You know what? If you call my column, they give you a little sign up thing at the bottom of it. So just sign up there if you haven't already.
Do it so you don't miss anything, and we'll be looking for your stuff from Chicago, which ought to be fascinating next week. And I always appreciate your time, brother. Thanks you so much for your insights and thoughts about this really just unprecedented situation that we're.
Yeah.
All right.
My pleasure. Always fun.
All right.